Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have another review of another Evercade card for you. Now these reviews are just kind of like reviews of what I felt like when I played the game for 30-40 minutes, kind of my initial impression. On an arcade game, that's usually a pretty good impression of whether or not you're going to enjoy it or not. So today I have the Data East collection for you guys. This one is number 2 on the arcade collection. So, with that said, we'll go ahead and pull the manual out here just real quick. I will flip through this for just a few seconds for you guys. You can see it's right here. It's going to be very awkward for me to flip through as I kind of look at my camera awkwardly. But you can see they've got a page on most of the games that are in here. And there are a significant number of games on this one. This one has 10 games total. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the first game that I messed with on this. And if you're into retro games, you know all about this game, and you probably played this game on the NES. This is Bad Dudes, but this is Bad Dudes versus Dragon Ninja, which is the arcade version of that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one real quick. This is the arcade version that the NES Classic came from, and is essentially another side-scrolling beat-em-up. This one's a bit different than most because the enemies drop in one hit, save the bosses, so it feels a little bit more like an old-school game like Kung Fu, but with a much better and dynamic stage design. You can really feel the arcade roots of this one in the number of enemies and how fast they come at you. It's one of the big downsides I'm finding of early arcade games is that the balance was way more towards making you just pump in quarters than giving you an average playtime. Not to say that the game isn't fun, there's a ton of fun to be had here. The sprites look great, everyone moves good, there's no slowdown, even when you get a ton of stuff on screen, which is good and bad. I say this because maybe if it had gotten a little bad, they might have toned it down a little more. If nothing else, so I'd look like I stink a little less in this one. In all seriousness, this is a really strong title for the collection to start out with, and it's an absolute blast to play if you're into beat-em-ups. Hey, if you're a fan of the genre, you're gonna love Bad Dudes. Alright, that one was actually pretty good. I actually really like that game. I think I'll probably play through all of that one. I think I made it to stage 3 or 4 and had a pretty good time with that one. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that one as well. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the next game that we got. And this one's called Breakthrough. Now, this is the kind of title that I kind of want to see on these carts because it's one of these I really hadn't heard anything from. And I really just had never even seen it in my life. So I was pretty excited when I booted it up. And had a really good time with it. Let's go take a look at Breakthrough. This is another pretty brutally hard arcade game where you're this DeLorean. Is that a DeLorean?
Great Scott.
Well, either way, it's been weaponized and now you have to break through enemy lines. The cool thing about this is not only do you control your speed and shoot, you can also jump. This allows you to jump over rock slides and barriers separating roads. It's a neat idea, even complete with a cool little animation section to boot. However, like most arcade games, this one doesn't really pull any punches either, and with one-hit kills, get ready to pop in a large number of credits in this to keep going. Controls are pretty solid and fluid for a game of this era. It has some really fun power-ups, and the graphics hold up well for this era of gaming as well. I really like this one, guys. It's another solid game. This collection's off to an amazing start. Next up is another arcade classic that if you haven't heard of it, you make me feel old and sad. Stop it. Stop it. Talking about, of course, Burger Time. This nightmare fuel of a game that was probably the inspiration of something like Sausage Party. In this game, you play a chef trying to assemble some burgers by running a series of ladders and dropping down toppings from the top to the bottom while being chased by sentient food. Yeah, this concept's actually kind of terrifying when you stop and think about it. Despite the rather wild concept, the game itself plays pretty well. It feels a little stiff compared to more modern arcade games with more modern control schemes, but it works rather well overall. Traversal is done with ladders, with you needing to avoid the food that's out to get you. You can use pepper to stun them, or drop toppings on the burger on top of them in order to get points. The stage ends when you fix up the number of required burgers. It's a classic old-school arcade game that can be very frustrating in the beginning due to its rather high skill ceiling, but it's a blast to play the better and better you get at it. Okay. So here's another one that I probably would not have found in a million years if it had not been on this collection, and that's Chain Reaction. This one's really cool. Let's check it out. This game reminds me a bit of other games like Bejeweled and Bubble Bobble, but with a bit of a twist. So you play this little... is that a Joker or a clown? I don't know. Anyway, the idea is to connect 3 of any of the symbols on the board to clear the board, and to do that you pull 1 or more from the ones coming down towards you and fire them back up at another section on the board, which is kind of a unique twist on this type of game. In most games, you would have the colors or symbols show up in a random order in your arsenal, and you would fire those up. In this game, what you do is, well, organize it in such a way that you can actually clear the board. I very quickly started losing time to this one as I got a better idea of what I was doing. It just became an awesome little puzzle game addition to the collection itself, with a neat enough twist to make it feel different from a lot of others that I've seen. Really have to say, I enjoyed my time with this one, and I'm looking forward to booting it up every now and then when I get the itch to play a puzzle game. Okay, and yet again, here's another one that I probably wouldn't have even thought of if it hadn't been on this collection, because I've never even seen or heard of it. Darwin 4078. It's a shoot 'em up. Let's take a look. This one actually kind of feels a little bit like a basic shooter at the start. However, it's got a pretty neat gimmick about it that we'll get into a little bit later. I mean, the basics are is it's a vertical scrolling shooter, and it does pretty much what all shooters do. You shoot forward, you move forward on the stage, and it all feels pretty normal. The enemies aren't anything graphically amazing, but they do the job. There's nothing super special about the way the sound or anything like that is, but it plays and controls really well overall, and it's a solid playing shooter. What gets kind of weird is when you start getting power-ups, because they're kind of randomized a little bit. And I've gotten some odd weapon configurations where I could just dodge like crazy, because my only fire rate was going from the left and right of my ship. There was no forward fire at all. The other interesting thing that happens in this one is when you take a hit from an enemy bullet, you lose a power-up. You don't immediately die. Collisions will still kill you and you'll lose a life, but you don't lose a life if you get hit by a bullet. You just get depowered a little bit, which is kind of really cool. And honestly, this is the kind of shooter I like to go back to from time to time, because it gives me a good vibe for where shooters came from, and then I can go back and look at more modern shooters and see where they've gotten from, and it's just a cool piece of video gaming history. I think it's worth your time to spend some time on this one. It's kind of neat. Once again, this collection comes in with another series that I haven't heard of, never saw in the arcade, may not have even given a second chance. This is Dark Seal 1. And Dark Seal 2 is on here too. We're going to get to that one later. But let's go ahead and take a look at this one real quick. Now, these games are sort of a Gauntlet, Dark Legacy style game where you pick your class and you fight your way through an isometric style stage, eventually making your way to a boss at the end of each one. Each character has a look and feel that's different from the others, along with different powers, and their use of magic is very different, much like Gauntlet and Golden Axe. I'm going to be the first to admit that I'm a bit of a sucker for these kinds of games, and they're a pretty easy sell to me as a result. This one's really no exception, even though it has a few odd quirks. The main quirk is, since it's an isometric game, and an early one at that, it's kind of hard to angle your character to hit things, since you can't really aim on the diagonal that I could see. It's not a big deal once you get used to it, but after years of playing modern games where you could aim in 8 directions instead of 4, it becomes a bit jarring to adjust to at first, but overall, it's pretty fun. It's just not as good as its sequel that we'll talk about a little bit later. Okay. I know you guys are going to hate me, but I hadn't even heard of this game until I saw it on this. I think I'd heard about it in passing, because some of you guys have mentioned it in reference, and that's Lock and Chase. Yeah, the arcade version of Lock and Chase is on this collection on it, and it's pretty good. Let's go ahead and go over this one. This one's both easy to explain and hard to explain if you haven't seen it. You play this weird dude in a top hat. I think that's a top hat. Anyway, Top Hat Man, I think, is a thief and shows up in his pimp car. Maybe he's a pimp. Maybe these coins are money he's owed. Anyway, he has to collect all these coins and avoid the cops while he's doing it. He looks and plays almost just like Pac-Man, but not quite as cleanly. Does, however, have a few tricks like doors that will open and close as the stage goes on, and it doesn't just end when you clear everything on the stage. You still have to get out one of the doors on the stage when you're done. This part kind of bit me in the rear the first time I cleared the stage. I was all proud of myself, like, yeah, I did it! Wait, what's going on? Aw, man! In all seriousness, though, I had a pretty good time with this one. And it's Well, I wouldn't say if it's as good as Pac-Man. I don't think it quite is. It could use some tighter controls, but it was a really fun variant on the concept and totally worth giving a few runs here and there. You might find you have a really good time with this one. Okay. I'll admit, I've been really looking forward to this one. This one's called Sly Spy, and basically it's like a 007 arcade coin-up game. I've really been looking forward to talking about this one. We gotta look at this one. This one's really cool, guys. I'll be the first to admit that the first couple times I tried this, I don't know that I was completely sold on it, just because of how quickly it ramps up the number of guys. But honestly, once you start getting into it, this game is some serious fun. You get to jump out of an airplane, fight bad guys on the street, ride a motorcycle. There's even an underwater level where you use a harpoon gun. If you can't tell, I really enjoyed my time with this one. It's a solid arcade fun quarter muncher, and it absolutely does eat the quarters, but it's really fun while it's doing it. If you have ever really wanted to play a James Bond game in an arcade coin-op, I think you're really going to enjoy this one. It's another one of those games I never knew existed, but it was so much fun. Okay, I'm going to admit that if I'd seen this one in the arcade back in the day, I probably would have given it a pass. It seems like a very niche game that would mostly get passed over by everybody else on their way to, like, say, Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat or Outrun or whatever. This one's called Tumble Pop, and I'll be honest, it's actually really cool, but I have a feeling it had like a very niche audience in the arcade, and it was probably way more overlooked than it really needed to be. This is kind of a strange game where you look sort of like a kid Ghostbuster, but instead of a proton pack, you have a vacuum that fires rainbows. It's very Japanese. Your goal is to suck up all these little monsters and fire them into other monsters in order to clear the board and earn money along the way. You run into tougher enemies the further you go on these little stages. There are these little vats that spawn more monsters, and you have to destroy that before fighting the boss at the end of each world. This is a neat little stage platformer, clearly one of those underrated arcade machines that would probably have a small niche following, and many others would just pass over it in favor of more popular titles. That said, it plays really, really well. You can suck up multiple enemies and fire them at once, or you can just vacuum them up for a little bit that'll stun them. This leads to a solid amount of strategy to help you manage some of the layouts that the game gives you. Overall, it looks good, it plays well, it's got some fun music going for it. I like this one, it's fun. Okay, so this one is called Wizard Fire. It's basically Dark Seal 2. It's the sequel to the one that we showed you a little bit earlier, and honestly, I think this one's actually a pretty cool title. I enjoyed both of these in this series. They remind me a lot of Gauntlet and Golden Axe. I would love to be able to have like more than 2 people on this one, but let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into it and take a look and kind of see what's different between this one and the first one. This plays a lot like the first one, but feels like an overall more polished, well-done version of the game. And it's a welcome final addition to the cart that's already brimming with some very good titles. My biggest complaint with this one, and the previous game, is that they only support up to 2 players, which is probably how the arcade cabinet was designed. It's not a fault on Blaze, I just wish that, like this and Dark Seal 1, that you could have had 4 players, especially since the verses can support that many at one time. Either way, it's another fun Gauntlet-like beat-em-up, and an easy sell for me. Well, hopefully you guys are enjoying this as much as I did. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this roundup of the Data East collection that came with my Evercade Founders Edition. I actually quite enjoyed my time with this series of games. There wasn't one of them that I didn't like. Most of these I would pretty much go back to plays on a semi-regular basis. They were all fun, they were all well put together. This was a very good, very strong collection of 10 games. And I couldn't be happier with it, to be quite honest. I'm looking forward to what comes up next. What I got with my Founders Edition. I already have a few other things ordered. So look for more of these in the future. And if you're enjoying this content, let me know in the comments that you're enjoying these reviews and what you think of them. Would you like to see deeper dives in some of them? Want to just see more collections on them? You know, what do you guys really want to see out of this? Anyway, don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, happy gaming!